Hello and a very warm welcome to the latest edition of the evexus Engage webinar series. My name is Ollie Matthews and I'm part of the team here at evexus, and it is my great pleasure to be your host today as we explore a fascinating topic. How do you engage with all the generations in your community in a meaningful and effective manner? Now, before I introduce our expert who's going to help us navigate this discussion today, I would like to take just a couple of moments, do a little bit of housekeeping and share some information and advice to help you get the most out of the session today and make it as valuable as possible for everyone who's joined us. First of all, please do get involved. You can use the orange Ask a Question button, which should be just below the media player that you're looking at me on now. Use that at any time you like and share questions, thoughts, ideas around the topic and the sort of the different areas that we cover today. The more that you share, the more rich the discussion is, the more engaging it is for everybody. And please do feel free to comment on other people's questions as well and kind of get a bit of a discussion thread going. There is some incredible experience and insight in our audience today, so please do get involved. The second point is not only get involved, but get involved early. We'll do sort of questions and answers at the end for sure, but you can ask questions at any point, and what we will do is weave them seamlessly into the discussion as we go. So please do comment early, comment often, and get involved. And then finally, asking a lot from you today, so apologies for that, but we'd love to hear from you afterwards as well about what other topics you would love to hear us engage in. We've done lots of different things before around diversing revenue streams and innovation, but we'd love to hear what else our audience would love to learn more about and explore together. That's kind of it in terms of the housekeeping rules, and they're out of the way. So let's get stuck into the most interesting parts. So multi-generational engagement, big terms, a big important topic. And if you want to get under the skin of a big important topic, you need a genuine expert. And it is my great pleasure to say that we have one of those with us today. And I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce Toni Brearley, who is CEO of the Australasian Society of Association Executives. Toni, thank you so much for joining us.
It is my absolute pleasure to be here, although I'm a little uncomfortable with the term of being an expert in this. I wish I was an expert in this particular topic because I think that it's something that many people are trying to solve. But I guess as the CEO of AuSAE, and for those who don't know what AuSAE is, we are the Australasian Society of Association Executives, essentially the associations for association professionals. So I do joke in my the fact that there is an association for absolutely everything, including other associations. But our job is to support people working in membership-based organisations to be the best they can be so they can serve their members and grow their industries and professions. So that is our job. And certainly this is a hot topic amongst our membership and certainly amongst the sector. So yeah, it's great to dig down and have a bit of a chat about, I think, what we're hearing, what we're seeing, and, maybe some potential solutions that we can offer today for people to go try out.
That's great. Thank you very much. And look, thank you again for joining us. Look, let's sort of set the scene. And you mentioned there the phrase hot topic. I would definitely agree with you. And we put some sort of stats together in advance of the session that certainly would lead one to believe that it is a big important topic. Some of those stats include that 30% of Australian associations are experiencing a decrease in membership. So those numbers are under threat. The average age of an association member is 52. Which sort of has some interesting stories behind it. And almost half, so 45% of Generation Z believe that associations need to modernize to be relevant. So, my first question to you, Toni, is then, is there sort of truth behind these data points? Is this actually a hot topic, first of all? Let's hope it is, otherwise this webinar is going to be quite short. Assuming that it is, why is it so important? Why does this matter?
Well, it matters because it's the future of our business, of our organizations. So if we're not actually growing our associations, then we are not going to be viable and not going to be able to do the good work that we've been doing. So, and again, I think we need to look at growth in a number of different ways. I think certainly, yes, if we talk about next generation, we generally talk about, you know, the Gen Z, Gen Alpha, how we're going to get them, how we're going to find them. But I also feel that we need to be mindful to not box our growth into just those sectors. And I feel that we do a lot of that. And, you know, thinking about the broader, I guess, career paths of everybody from, you know, from me right down to Gen Z, is that it's not linear anymore, and career paths are not linear. So once upon a time, you know, you went to school, if you were lucky, you went to university, or you did a trade, or you found a job, and you generally stayed in that job for a really long time, and you know, you worked your way up. So there was a linear career path that I think associations could very clearly engage in those career points now. And I think I did a presentation not that long ago, and the data about that was, I think we were having our children leaving school now will have 11 different careers. 11. So you're not always going to go from school into a career, and so associations need to look for new members other than just at that student or that entry level. You know, you could be a 35-year-old previous accountant that's transitioned to be a teacher. That's not unusual. So your teacher is, you know, your 35-year-old teacher is actually your next generation of members. Certainly associations like ours, so they're not, I guess, they're not traditional associations. We actually call them second career associations, where you might be something else like I was. You come into the role, and then, you know, I was, I think, nearly 40 by the time I started in associations, but I was next generation. So I think we also need to maybe broaden our concept of what next generation looks like. And that's probably a different starting point to what a lot of people are starting at as well.
Yeah, look, I think you're right. I think you're certainly right about that. It's very easy to fall into that trap of the generational debate and assuming that, like, well, this age group think in this way, and we need to understand that. And if we can understand that, then that, you know, that's the pot of gold, that's the solution. But like you say, it's very, very different. So how did associations, and look, it's not just associations, to be fair, but like how did we get into this point? How did we fall into this trap?
Look, I think again, it's tradition. It's tradition and what has always been. And I think if you know, I don't like to blame everything on technology, but it certainly plays a massive part of how our society as a whole has changed. The technology changes between, let's say, you know, the last 10, 15 years compared to the previous 10, 15 years. I mean, the biggest thing that happened in the previous 10, 15 years is that we got the internet, and that opened up a whole nother world. But that was kind of it in some ways. You know, yeah, our computers got faster and we could get more data, and we got, like, you know, laptops and, you know, devices that could carry around. And then the iPhone came out. And really from that point, you know, smartphones arrived. I mean, I remember, and I had finished, I was not a young person when I was still texting, you know, when you had to, you know, text by the numbers and work out, you know, how many, there was no words. There was no, exactly, like CCC and exactly. So if you think about in that perspective, you know, then the technological change that's happened since about, it's around 2000, let's say, give or take, you know, to the last sort of 24 years, that kind of makes me feel really old, compared to, say, the previous 25 years. It's a lot, but it hasn't just affected associations, it's affected the way that we do everything. And so that, again, I feel that, you know, in the previous 25 years, it's like we need to get the students, we need to get the graduates, we need to understand how they work. But in fact, actually, what we need to do is think about how society has changed, how people are purchasing goods and services, and how we can adapt our associations to make that a better experience. And yes, will that bring in younger, more tech savvy, or just a different type of member? Probably. But it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to box them into, you know, generation Z and, beyond type thing. Does that make sense?
No, it absolutely does. And it also, and this might be getting a little bit metaphysical, but it also kind of calls into question the whole concept of sort of the definition of membership then, and making sure, like I say, we're not staying in that traditional view of what a member is and what membership means in terms of an annual subscription and you get this, this, and this, or that actually it challenges that whole convention.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing is that, membership purchases, for want of a better word, don't act in a vacuum compared to everybody else's purchases with all the other things that they buy in their life. So I think in some ways we've always thought we were a bit special. This is about your profession and you should join and it's great for you and it's great for your career and, please fill out this paper-based form and we'll decide in 3 weeks whether you can join us or not. I'm obviously exaggerating, but we all get the concept. Whereas, and I'll use my grocery shopping analogy, is that, right now today, there's about 10 at least incantations of the way you can purchase groceries. You can do the old-fashioned way where you go into the store, you pop it in your trolley and you take it to, if you can find one, a person that puts it through the checkout for you. You can self-checkout. You can go and you've got the app and it actually scans it and you pay it and that's in store. Then you can pick it up. Then you can order it online and you can pick it up. You can order it online and you can get it delivered. Uber Eats will deliver your groceries now. So there's a whole different way that you can purchase essentially the same product. And I think if you keep that, and, it's not limited to all the young people deliver. No, they don't. Shift workers deliver. People like me who have, don't have a lot of time and quite frankly hate grocery shopping. I love not having to go see the inside of a grocery store. But then you've got people that do love it and love to touch and feel and see that. So it's offering services and that's just groceries. You can buy insurance in some ways. You can buy, book appointments to get your hair done in different ways. So we have to think about the fact that we are not in a vacuum as associations as far as the purchasing of our goods and services. Now, do younger folk have a leniency towards technology? Yes, of course they do, because it's all they've ever known. Most of our children at school now don't take books, or they've got one book. Their textbooks are online, their exams are online, they submit, their class notes are online. So that is their life. They don't know any different. But it's not a young person kind of issue. I think it's a broader issue for our associations. And if we start to kind of open our thinking, I think we start to potentially think of different solutions.
Yeah. We've got our first question in as well, so thank you very much for that. Like I say, please do ask those questions just below the player window. We'll cover those off as we go. I'm thinking then about that that younger generation. First of all, the question sort of talks around offering free memberships to students. So can you talk to us a little bit about, we're kind of jumping to solutions already, but like, can you unpick this a little bit, maybe like from the point of view of like, does it work, and if not, why not?
Look, and it depends. And the other thing I will preface this with is, the ex-CEO who sadly passed away a couple of years ago, John H. Graham from AuSAE, he has this really famous saying of, if you've seen one association, you've seen one association. So again, there's no silver bullet for everybody that works. I think that's the other thing you have to think about. Does free membership work? Well, of course it does. Everybody likes a freebie. But I think then you need to think really carefully. And this is what I would say. What problem are you trying to solve by providing free membership? And is it your problem, as in we want the student members, we want to get them engaged early, it's about us? Or are you trying to solve a student member's graduates' early career problems? And do you know what they are? And does offering free membership solve that problem? And I think that's how we have to catch it. I think there's a tradition with lots of associations that go, our students can't afford it, so let's just give everything for free. But then when they graduate, we're going to try and charge them money for all the services they've just got for 3 years. And actually they're in a career, life, age and stage where money is a pressure. And have we solved, or have we provided the value that they think that they can't live without it? If you're getting a huge drop off, my educated guess would be, no, you're not. You haven't actually solved a problem or provided the value that they're happy to, change their purchasing decisions to be able to afford that membership.
And look, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. And I sort of ask you, is that the first step then as we look to try and address this issue? Is it asking yourself, do we honestly understand what needs and wants and problems this group have, or the different groups within our community, not just membership, but within our community actually have, and sort of having that honest reflection about how much you genuinely understand your community?
Yeah, exactly. And look, I'll put my hand up. We don't do enough of it either. And I think that's the other thing is you genuinely have to ask that community. You have to put in the hard work up front to try and understand, so that you've got informed decisions that you can make, rather than, well, we'll just put on more free events, or we'll just do more of this, or, I think, as you say, really go back to what is the problem that we're trying to solve. Because ultimately membership, as much as we want to think that we sell membership on the fact that it's the right thing to do, and don't get me wrong, like, I love associations. I can rattle off all the things that we all do that people don't hear or see, but they're individual purchases. So are you making that value proposition known and solving a problem for the people who are making those purchases? Because ultimately that's what we need to do.
On that, and let's get sort of really practical here for a second, for the to give the audience at home something to take away with. You mentioned there about doing the work, working hard, trying lots of different things. What are some of those methods or approaches that you found effective in terms of getting to know the audience?
Look, one, I think this has to be a whole of organizational objective to start with. So it doesn't have to start at the top, but it definitely has to be a whole of organizational thing. Because the reason I say that is your membership team sending out a survey, yeah, that's great, and you'll get some response. But in fact, if you've got, and I've heard of associations doing this, like every touch point with a member, you might have a question of the month, like, what is your, let's just pick something, what is your desired month to conference? What month would you like us to have our conference in, or what month would it work for you? Now, yeah, you're probably going to get the 12 months of the year, but the point is, and that's just an off the top of my head thing, but it's like, if every person that's having an interaction with that member, be it at an event, be it, a customer service phone call, be it in whatever perspective, is asking the same question and collecting the data, obviously, then, you're getting a much broader sample of the let's face it, 10 to 20% of people that will actually fill out your member survey. I'm not saying don't do member surveys, of course you need to, but I think, there's different types of ways you can collect data. I've seen people do polls on LinkedIn. That's one way. In your newsletter, do a 1-question survey. I think, again, shorter, sharper, more focused, how is this going to, what's in it for me type stuff. Asking those questions is a really great way to start to think about it. But again, I think it needs to be, because I think once it's an all of organizational kind of exercise, it changes those internal conversations as well.
Yeah, that's a good point, isn't it? Because it changes it from being an item on a to-do list,
Yes.
To a genuine value and cultural aspect, cultural element
Correct.
Interestingly as well, so what you're saying there around, what month would work best for you for conference, and I get it as an example, but even in that, there's an assumption that they want a conference, or that the conference is the best form of that experience, or and so even there, it's like, I guess you don't want to unpick things right down to that sort of atomic level, but it is worth challenging some of these assumptions that we can
Correct.
easily fall into. I know
Correct.
from sort of previous lives that I've had, I was always fascinated speaking with sort of product researchers and user experience researchers who, when talking about learning from an audience, learning from a community, were saying that surveys are great because you can potentially get a lot of information in a pretty effective, efficient manner. But one of the things that they were saying is that a lot of people feel like, well, we couldn't possibly speak with 1,000 people, that would just be crazy. But actually, the data shows that you don't need to speak to 1,000 people. If you have a half an hour conversation with 10 people, you can actually pick up on some really key consistent themes that get kind of under the hood of those themes in a much more useful way than just a big blanket survey and you're trying to unpick 1,000 results. So that would, just from my own sort of experience, getting on the phone or going for a coffee with 10, 15 people is incredibly valuable, even though that might be a small percentage of your community.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And remember, when you're sending a survey to, let's say, 1,000 people, I mean, average survey rates are they're between 15 and 20%. So you're only actually getting 200 opinions anyway. So if you try and go, well, what if I tried to get 100 curated and valuable opinions, or the opinions of people that that you don't hear from, And the other thing I'm very big on, non-members. Ask your non-members why they're not members.
Yeah.
You need to do that, because how do you change anything if you don't understand what you're trying to change?
Yeah. On that as well, do you kind of sit in that interesting position as well, where you are both the head of a sort of an association, but also then oversee the association sector as a whole? Do you see much collaboration in sort of sharing insights, sharing survey reports, data, feedback, that kind of stuff across the industry as a whole?
Look, not as a whole. We try and do as best as we can, because we do know that there are common denominators, I guess, with many associations. And I guess, part of the whole next generation stuff, that's a huge common denominator. How do we grow our associations? How do we use and how do we change our models of the way that we deliver services now to be more appealing? And so yes, we do try and do that. I don't think there's any sort of common depository of stuff though. But look, the other thing I would say is use your initiative as well. Like, if you are friendly or someone in another association, or quite honestly, that's our job, come to me and say, hey, do you know someone who's friendly that might share those survey results? What I do know about this sector is generally we're non-competitive, so people are really willing to help one another to for the greater good, to help other people out as well.
Again, it would make for some really interesting benchmarking as well, which again, it's because it's one thing to sort of analyze yourself and your own processes and approaches, but it's really useful to then benchmark that externally. Okay. So we sort of talked a little bit there about some of those practical steps, thinking not just in terms of getting to know your audience, but thinking, I guess about communicating in general. Have you found, so what's your kind of approach to using different methods and platforms? And you've touched on that a little bit already, but like, how have you noticed any trends in terms of different pockets within the community engaging more with this style and less with that style?
Look, I know generally the younger generation certainly are not emailers. So I have a 19-year-old and a 14-year-old, so I feel like I speak with some authority in this, in this area. The only time they ever email me is if they want, want something, or the only time they check their email is if they're online shopping or there's some reason.
Yeah.
The way they communicate with their peers is anything but. So I think that's what you have to remember. And, you know, it's probably something that lots of people say, you need to go where they are. So if you're trying to email someone, you know, constantly, which we do, right? Because it's easy. We know how to do it. We've got our data. We know how, you know, I'm not saying it's bad. We do it too. But yes, I think one, go and trying different platforms. AuSAE ourselves have tried, you know, and I know people have noticed it, you know, we've invested a little bit in socials in the last sort of 8 months. I have to say it's working. And I don't just think, and again, it's great at attracting new audiences that you haven't seen before or know before. Everyone will say that they're not on Facebook, but the data actually says otherwise. So personally, most people are on Facebook. Even the young ones will have some sort of Facebook account to do something with. It's not how they communicate necessarily, but it is there. So Facebook is a great starting point for that stuff. Now, do we all need to be TikTok stars for it to work? God knows. God, I hope not. I don't think I can do that. But, you know, again, probably into the future, we need to kind of understand where those platforms are and maybe investing a little bit more time and energy into seeing, as you say, where those growth areas are. And look, there's some associations, particularly in the US, I've seen, you know, doing great TikToks, and, you know, TikTok's coming to Instagram Reels too. So the one thing I would actually say from a platform perspective, Instagram is a nice kind of meshing of the world. So, you know, the TikTok, and I know I sound very educating this, I'm actually not, but, you know, your TikTok reels, I mean, you just know what you do when you scroll in bed at night, you know, but, and unfortunately you go, oh, did you see that, like, TikTok? Yeah, mum, that was like, you know, 3 weeks ago, but it's just hit Instagram reel. The point is it does, is what I'm trying to say. So again, I think using socials is really important. I don't think you can't do that anymore. I hear and I have heard, well, that's not where our members are. Well, maybe they're not, but your future members might be. So I do, and we need to get more sophisticated in the way that we do that. You need to use paid ads. I'm sorry, you do. Like, you need to invest in this as a channel. And I think you'll find, you know, there's growth in that area.
And interesting point on the TikTok side of things as well is that, again, you might learn that actually your audience and desired new members aren't necessarily using TikTok as much, or it doesn't justify you setting up your own TikTok channel. However, short form content is incredibly successful and effective. So maybe there is another way in which, you know, an association can use its own website or whatever it is, but that style of content is undeniably popular and effective, and it's not just cats on skateboards anymore, sadly.
Sadly.
Sadly, yeah, the good old days. But you know, there's a lot of education out there. There's genuine, useful learning and education that people and respected individuals from different sectors are there with a presence.
And that's another thing I would say, a trend I've noticed is education, video education. So again, ask a teenager how do you know, bake a cake? They will go to a YouTube video before they will go to a written website. So think about that from your own association's perspective. Even why should you join us? Well, they're not going to go to your why should you join us join page on your website. What they might do, though, is go to a YouTube video where you've got somebody explaining that short form, 25 seconds, go. So they're the ways that you can pop your toe. And look, none of us, like, you know, I'm exactly the same. You know, I don't want to create videos and put them on social, but I do this all the time. So what's the difference?
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
They don't care that it's, you know, the audience that you're trying to do, they're not picking picking apart what you look like or how you sound, or it's the content that they're after. And so, yes, thinking about how you can implement some of that, I think, to show that you are a modern association, but also, you know, that's where they are. So that's where you need to go.
And you know, we started off by saying that we didn't want to fall into that trap of assuming it's all about how do we engage the younger generation. You know, we are talking multi-generational here. So again, in terms of those methods and platforms for communicating, is there anything that you know, not just the younger generation sort of across the full spectrum, any other things you found that are particularly effective or useful?
Podcasts.
Okay, yeah.
Podcasts have become really very, very popular with over 35s. So initially they were kind of thinking that they were, again, a young person thing. In fact, the age of, you know, the average age of podcasting, I think, is 35. Someone could correct me, but it's a lot older than what you think it is. So again, it's not so much your, you know, your 20 or your 25-year-olds. It's that it's something you can do whilst you're doing something else. So, I mean, if you know people, they say, oh, yes, I listen to this in the car. I put it on when I go for a walk. I put it on when I'm cooking dinner. You know, so that's one of those things. So again, audio content and podcasts, I think, is another thing. And technology is making this easier to do. I mean, we could turn this, slice it up into audio only content. So, and even, I think I'm going to say even I could do it. I'm not sure that I could, but it's someone can, someone can. Yeah, but so you don't have to think of podcasts as in I need to go and create a podcast. What you could think of is how do I chop up content that we've got into a different format and push that out and see how it goes. And if there's one thing associations do amazingly is create content. If there's another thing that we do terribly is to use that in a really valuable way.
Look,
and more than once, you know.
Yeah, I was going to say exactly. I mean, you know, we are having this conversation today, and it, you know, it'd be 45 minutes, an hour kind of thing, and that, you know, you could look at that and go, well, it's a lot of time from the day, and there's a bit of prep involved and all that kind of stuff as well. Like, you know, is that a good time investment? But then, like you say, you get a video out of it. You can then slice that up into shorter pieces. You can then use that in social content and email content, like exactly like you say. Take the audio, put that out as your podcasts. The video goes on YouTube. Suddenly you've actually done an hour, and you've now got content that you can use across a month and even longer. One of the areas that I wanted to touch on was coming back to the sort of the younger generation. I don't think it's just the younger generation, but I think it is. It is definitely, it is true within the younger generation. Is the idea of authenticity and purpose are increasingly important to that group. I've always felt that associations are, you know, by definition, sort of naturally very purposeful. But how can an association make sure it's genuinely demonstrating those qualities to appeal to that audience?
I'm with you. We 100% are purpose driven. It's what we do. So we need to be better at explaining that. I think it's not even so much what do we need. Do we need to change anything? No. But I think it's also thinking about the outcomes focused stuff that we do. So by supporting our podiatrists, you know, the outcome of that is that we have healthier humans over here. So in fact, our associations helps, you know, support healthier humans. That's a bit, and I'm sorry to the podiatrists, I'm sure you could do that a lot more eloquently, but for me, you know, like we support every industry, every sector, every day. If you come and work for us, or if you join us, you are actually part of a greater good, a bigger picture than just this picture. And that is what appeals to, you know, the younger generation. They are purpose driven. They're not that sort of profit capitalistic driven. Look, don't get me wrong, some of them are, and some of them are. So some of them are also quite entrepreneurial. So, well, what's in it for me? Well, you know what? Maybe it's just we're going to get you to your next thing.
Yeah.
And that's all you need to know. You don't have to sell them 1,000 things. What's your next thing? We'll get you there. But yes, but I do think we need to be better at explaining that. I do see some associations actually like taking it then that one step further, and they create volunteering opportunities for their members in, you know, it could be, you know, overseas or just local volunteering opportunities. So, you know, as a member-based organisation, you know, and valuing, let's say, go to the podiatrist, and we will create clinics to go out into maybe rural and remote areas. So, you know, you could take it very specifically as well. But, you know, I think pushing those areas in which we do the good, but pulling that out. And it works in two ways too. Like if people are struggling to employ people, you know, actually explaining what you do in a way that connects with them. And then obviously from a membership perspective, like I want to be part of this, because remember, membership in itself is an emotional decision. There's actually a connection to, I want to be part of this. I want to be part of this world. I feel like this is somewhere that I belong and that I can contribute to. And I think that's another big thing as well, is that contribution aspect is something we all need to probably do a bit better. How can you talk about authenticity? How can we open up our doors and get some genuine contributions from our, you know, members to help them feel like they're creating something else as well?
Yeah. And on that, sort of taking that idea of volunteering as well, the topic of mentoring
Yes.
comes up quite a lot in terms of sort of a potential value. Have you seen that work, or I guess, where have you seen that work well? How have you seen it work its best?
Again, when I think it's great. I think it's probably one thing that, you know, associations could really use. I heard a story recently about the Hire and Rental Association here in Australia. So they're the operators of, you know, stuff that you hire and rental. So, you know, anything from marquees to diggers to cranes to, you know, that industry. And they've actually they've created a massive mentoring program for, because it's a lot of owner operated businesses within those organizations. So it's a little bit about bringing in that next generation as well. So they've created a really great mentoring program within their organization to bring in those, I guess, or to find a place for those new people, and then they feel like they are part of the sector rather than just, you know, Bob's kid and, you know, that sort of thing. Like that they've got a place. I know Queensland Sugar are trying to do the same things, like creating spaces for and bringing in, because really that's what they want. They want to know that there's somewhere for them to go. This is not just a family business I have to take over. You wanting to do different things. I really interestingly, and that can be formal mentoring, but I think there's informal mentoring that can happen too. So AuSAE did a webinar, it was probably nearly 2 years ago, with, you know, some of our younger members. And what was really interesting out of each of them, and the reason they got involved in AuSAE and the reason that they became part of the organisation, was because they had somebody else bring them along, whether that was their you know, immediate supervisor or somebody else actually said, hey, you know, I think this would be good for you, you know, come to an event, come to this, do this, and actually had somebody bring them into the fold and I guess champion them and to provide them with some support. So there was, you know, 3 of them on the panel, probably 3 of our most engaged people actually had a mentor actually bring them into that organisation. So how do you set up those processes as well? I think that's another way, because I know people go, oh, you know, the mentoring programs are so big, they're so complex, and they can be expensive, you know, you have to resource.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be. Again, you can take it back and go, well, why don't we just ask all of our senior members, our senior CEOs, why don't you create a CEO, you know, +1 event where they bring somebody to an event, and then you can just start in a small way.
That's a really interesting idea, and it kind of touches on something that's came to mind around the benefit and value of partnership as well. Then, whether it be through employers, whether it be through universities with students, whatever it is. But actually, again, the association not feeling, well, this is all on us. How are we going to do it? We're already jam packed with all these other things we've got to do. But again, sort of spreading that net and looking for partnerships. The idea of sort of partnership and collaboration sound like it might be useful.
Yeah, 100%. Let's look for the common denominator. Who will value by, like, again, I don't want to, I'm just giving practical examples. Like, so we partner with the Adelaide Convention Centre to do a Future Leaders Scholarship to the conference. It's a one-off. Well, it's a yearly thing. It's not a big group, but again, looking for partners within your network that value, and part of their values is, I guess, supporting the next generation of leaders or whatever that may be. So look for those partners that have those values and partner with them to help you do that. 100%, yes.
Yeah, I know. I mean, from our own side, it's something we've been sort of talking with yourself about, and sort of talking with others about as well. Is sort of what are those common challenges that, and we have a different point of view on a different expertise to sort of to help tackle it. But we're all interested in achieving in a positive new outcome for that solution, and it makes it. I think it makes the solution more effective, but the journey ends up being much more fun and engaging as well for everybody. So I think that kind of partnership approach is kind of crucial. We're going to go through another few topics here, and I would encourage everyone who hasn't asked a question yet, please do. We've got Toni, the I'm going to say expert. I think she humbly says not expert, but expert here. So please do include your questions down below. But Toni, thinking about that to-do list, we're all busy. It's not as if associations are currently sitting there going, oh, thank goodness I listened to Toni. I've had nothing to do today. I can now do a mentor program. That's great. So how do you start, I guess, with this kind of stuff? If you're if you're someone there sitting going, yeah, this is a problem. We've identified this as an issue, but we're busy and we're not entirely sure where to start. Have you got any kind of practical advice on how to start tackling things?
So my best advice would be start with the ones that you already have. Start with the champions that you already have. Now, generally, in my opinion, there are people, and anybody who knows Vicky Mayo for Local Government Association, she has this great story about Dan. Dan was this very young, energetic, single member who was so excited about his profession, he wanted to grow it, and said to Vicky, I'm going to help you do that. And Vicky, God bless her, said, go, off you go, Dan, and allowed him the space to create the types of activities and, I guess, topics and things that his peers wanted. And then, and then actually, and this story has progressed exponentially. And so they have this whole, young professionals program within Local Government Association. So, so start with who you already have and find out what they value. They're the ones with the peers. Go get them to help you, and just start small. Start with one thing. You don't have to solve the whole industry or your whole association sector problem, in a week. Start there, ask the questions, and try as best as you can, I think, to throw out what you already know and maybe just allow a little bit of creative space, for them to be able to shape what they want. And then try and, and I know everyone's going, oh, my board will never let me do this. Yeah, I know. But if it's a problem and if you can demonstrate outcomes and data, it's amazing how I think results change opinions as well.
Yeah, I think you touched on something interesting there with that idea of experimentation, because the idea should be that actually the new thing you're going to try, whatever it is, kind of contain it, make it quite small and, like you say, measurable, so that when you have done it, you can then say, you can look at the data. Here is what we've learned. Here's categorically what we've learned, and here's how it's going to help us. And like I say, if you do need to then bring others on board, that's a key part of that narrative, that kind of persuasive narrative that you can use. There's a couple more questions I kind of sort of want to work through with you. One of them is a little bit big, so take this kind of however you'd like to. But let's look into the future a little bit here, and let's think about any trends or developments that you see out there in general that you think are going to shape the way in which associations should and can engage with the different generations within their community. Is there anything out there that you're kind of seeing, like, actually, yeah, if we start seeing this happening, then we're going to need to have a plan in place to react to it?
It is a big question.
It is a big, sorry, yeah, I know it's,
Yeah.
I've had your coffee, so yeah.
At the risk of sounding a little bit cliche, I do feel ensuring we are digital first and technology first organizations is going to be really important. Now, the reason I say that, and I go back to what I said earlier, is we don't live in a vacuum. So if we look difficult and different to interact with as everything else, then you're just going to lose interest. Like, it's, I really dislike not knowing the price of something when I'm trying to do a little bit of research. Like, so I think, just think about your own behaviors when you're buying other things other than membership, so to speak. Will our models change? You got to kind of think maybe they will, maybe they won't. I mean, not even if you think that we live in this subscription-based world, and yes, our memberships are subscriptions to a certain point, but not 100% of associations, including us, offer a monthly opt-in, opt-out. Now, there's a reason for that, because our constitutions kind of say that it's a 12-month commitment, and we can't just let people join for 3 months, or what? Why? Like, I get why, but why can that not be changed? And is that going to be something that's going to change the way that we work to the future? So I feel that also just keep looking for what's out there, and when you're buying petrol's a really bad example, actually, because we haven't really changed that, but when you're sort of making other decisions, then what are we competing with essentially? And you even look at the way, even education, what are you competing with in an education space? There's I look at the masterclass stuff that you see come through, like on LinkedIn, and they've got really massive speakers and things like that. It's $129 a year. Now, might I buy that rather than go over here to one of your events, or another event? Well, maybe I will. But how do we then get into that space and making sure? So I haven't really answered the question, but I don't think there's any way we can get away with not being digital first, because that is the way. The other thing I will say, and I do not want to make this an AI thing, but I guess it does.
That's next month's webinar. Don't spoil it.
But that is part of being technology first. So it's not actually about AI, it's about being technology first. What are the processes? What are the systems? What are the things that we can implement to make that stuff that is routine easily done, so we can actually create space and time for us to, I don't ever think human interaction will go away, but let's see if we could take 20% of the admin of our association to actually get 20% more human interaction. I think it's thinking about things like this. How do we change the focus of where we're putting resources to create more?
Yeah, and AI is a fascinating topic, and I can imagine if I said to the audience listening in today, put your hand up if you've been in a webinar, conference session, internal shop, about AI.
And I got nearly 50 minutes in without mentioning it. So.
No, and anyone who did put their hand up at home, thank you very much for joining in. But I think that conversation needs to go to the next level of like, yeah, great, fantastic, very cool. How do we
Yes,
do
yeah,
this? How
100%.
practically? And that comes back to your, your earlier point around experimentations. Going, well, let's have a play. Let's experiment here a little bit. Let's do something sort of small and contained, but let's have an experiment and let's learn something. And
Correct.
I
Yeah.
think as part of that as well, and it's in line with your digital first approach, but that topic of personalization.
Yeah.
I know that's something that you and I have spoken about. Like, is that another kind of key area that associations really need to embrace?
100%.
Mm.
We want things personalized. We want things. I don't want what everybody else wants. I just want what I need.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the groceries. Like again, there's this. I don't want a meal box. I actually just want to get the stuff that I want. Now, some people do, and that's fine. But I think we are in this time that everybody has this sort of concept that they have something that fits just them.
Mm.
And yes, absolutely is what we need to work with that. The good thing is that is something that technology can help us with.
Mm.
Certainly.
Yeah. Yeah. Tony, I'm going to ask you for your final thoughts on the subject in a second. Anything that you haven't mentioned that you'd like to kind of share with the audience at home? Before I do that, I just want to get a request out to the audience. If there are any final questions at all that you would like to ask Toni, please put them in the ask questions section just below the media player now, and we'll do our best to cover them off before the end. But Toni, any final thoughts that you'd like to share as we wrap things up today?
I think the question of the next generation of members is not one that has just popped up now. It's
Mm.
it's the age old, question of time. It doesn't have to be solved all at once. So it's kind of like evolution, not revolution, but also ask them, get them in me deciding what and I'm talking, whatever, 10, 20 years below, that's not actually useful. And I think if you can kind of get that culture of inclusion and that culture of bringing in the ideas, no matter how crazy they sound, that's innovation, right? It's throw things out the wall to see what sticks. And I think really trying to create those spaces for that to happen is something we should all try and do, because you just never know, one, what might fall out, but two, how that can change more than just that bit as
Mm.
well.
Yeah. Thank you very much indeed on behalf of myself and all the audience who've been listening in. Thank you very much indeed, Toni. We really appreciate your time and the very sort of useful practical examples that you've shared with us today. And thank you everybody at home, at work, wherever you might be dialing in. We really appreciated you joining us, taking this time out of your day. Some great questions, lots of sort of chat going back and forth. We will be running more of these. Toni sort of has touched on topics there around working with your board, innovation, AI. Those are all topics that we're fascinated by as well. If you do have any particular topics that you'd like us to explore, please do either mention them here on the platform, but we'll also be sending out survey emails afterwards as well. Learning from Toni there about asking the audience to learn more about what you'd like to hear from us next. But for now, thank you very much indeed for joining us. I wish you all a very good day and see you next time.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for having me.